Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield. November the 16th, 1957. Police enter a farmhouse in Wisconsin and find a headless body hanging in the shed like a deer carcass. But that wasn't the worst part. Inside the house, bowls made from human skulls, lampshades made from skin, a belt stitched from human nipples, and masks, dozens of them, crafted from the faces of the dead. The owner? A quiet, polite handyman everyone in town trusted. His name was Ed Gein, and what police found in that farmhouse would inspire Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Silence of the Lambs. This is the true story behind the horror done by the Butcher of Plainfield. Welcome to Evil Crime Archives, where power, danger, and deception collide. From the world's most ruthless criminals to the untold stories of the underworld, we uncover the secrets others fear to tell. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to get more of those stories. But here's what haunts investigators to this day. Ed only killed 2 people, so where did all those bodies come from? That answer will disturb you. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Never Left. Edward. Theodore Gein was born on August 27, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. A boy who would one day become one of America's most infamous figures. He was the second son of George and Augusta Gein, 2 people as mismatched as they were destructive. His father, George, was a violent alcoholic who drifted from one failed job to another. His mother, Augusta, was the complete opposite, devoutly religious, controlling, and obsessed with moral purity. Augusta believed the world was filled with sin and corruption, and she made sure her sons knew it. She taught Ed and his older brother Henry. To him, Augusta wasn't just a parent, and when she died, Ed Gein's world shattered. But in his twisted mind, he never let her go. And what he did to keep her close would shock the world. Chapter 2. Death Comes to Plainfield. By the time Ed Gein reached his 30s, death had already begun to circle the small, isolated farm he called home. In 1940, his father, George, succumbed to heart failure, a quiet end for a man who had spent most of his life drowning in alcohol. That left Augusta and her 2 sons, Ed and Henry, to tend to the lonely property in Plainfield, Wisconsin. 4 years later, tragedy struck again. In 1944, while burning brush in the fields, a fire spread unexpectedly. When the flames were finally out, Henry was missing. Ed led police to his brother's body, lying face down in the dirt. The official cause of death was listed as asphyxiation, but there were strange bruises on the back of Henry's head. Chapter 3. The Farm of Shadows. After Augusta's death, Ed Gein retreated into the decaying farmhouse that had once been ruled by her iron hand. The property, miles outside the small town of Plainfield, became his entire world. A place frozen in time and filled with ghosts of the past. Outwardly, Ed seemed harmless. He worked as a handyman for neighbors, helped with chores, even babysat for local families. People described him as shy but polite, a bit odd perhaps, but never threatening. Behind closed doors, though, his world was crumbling. The farmhouse fell into ruin. Rooms filled with trash, dishes festered in the sink, and the air was thick with decay. Ed lived without running water or electricity. By night, he read horror magazines, anatomy books, and articles about headhunters and Nazi experiments. These grotesque stories fascinated him, blending fantasy and reality until he could no longer tell them apart. But it was his grief for Augusta that consumed him most. Ed couldn't accept that she was gone. Her death left an emptiness he couldn't fill, and his thoughts turned toward the impossible, resurrection. And that's when Ed Gein began visiting cemeteries at midnight with a shovel. What started as mourning soon became obsession. The farm that had once been a family home was now a shrine to death, a place where grief, madness, and horror began to take root. Chapter 4. The Midnight Raids. Between 1947 and 1952, the lonely fields of Plainfield hid a gruesome secret. Under the cover of night, Ed Gein roamed the local cemeteries, lantern in hand, shovel slung over his shoulder. He waited for recent burials, studied obituaries, and chose only women who resembled his beloved mother, Augusta. Once darkness fell, Ed would dig through the cold earth, unearthing their freshly buried bodies. He carried them back to his decaying farmhouse, where the line between life and death had long since blurred. There, his twisted devotion turned into ritual. He skinned the corpses, tanned their hides, and dissected them with eerie precision. Bones, skulls, and organs were preserved as mementos, fragments of an obsession that refused to die. When police would later search the farmhouse, what they uncovered defied comprehension. They found a lampshade made of human skin, bowls carved from skulls, chairs upholstered with human flesh, even a belt stitched together from nipples. A grotesque collection of trophies that turned his home into a house of horrors. Neighbors who once saw Ed as quiet and harmless could never have imagined what hid behind those rotting walls. Chapter 5. The Missing Woman. It was November 16th, 1957. A cold, quiet morning in the small town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. Bernice Worden, the well-liked owner of the local hardware store, vanished without a trace. He noticed something strange when he stopped by. The store was empty, the cash register open, and a trail of blood led to the back door. Checking the last entry in the receipt book, he saw the final sale. 1 can of antifreeze, sold to a familiar name, Ed Gein. That clue sent police straight to Gein's isolated farmhouse on the edge of town. What they found there would become the most disturbing crime scene in American history. As they stepped through the door, the stench hit them first. Thick, sour, and unmistakably wrong. The cluttered rooms were filled with rotting garbage, bones, and something far worse. In a small shed behind the house, their flashlights caught a nightmare sight. Chapter 6. The House of Horrors. When deputies reached the Gein farmhouse, the front door was locked tight. They forced their way in, and were hit instantly by a wave of cold air and decay. One officer immediately vomited. Another couldn't speak for 20 minutes. The electricity had been cut off for months. The only light came from their flashlights, slicing through the darkness to reveal a nightmare no one could have imagined. In the shed, Bernice Worden's body, headless, gutted, strung up like game. Inside the house, it got worse. Human skulls mounted on bedposts, masks stitched from human faces, boxes filled with bones, a refrigerator packed with human organs, the furniture, the very air seemed soaked in death. For years, Ed Gein had lived quietly among his neighbors, the shy, polite handyman everyone trusted. But inside his home, he had built a museum of the macabre, a shrine to the dead. Chapter 7. The Arrest. When police found Ed Gein at a local grocery store that cold November night, he didn't struggle or run. Instead, he smiled faintly, almost as if a terrible weight had finally lifted. At the station, he spoke with eerie calm, confessing to everything: the grave robberies, the murders, and the horrifying projects he made from human remains. He told investigators he had been trying to create a woman's suit, made entirely from the skin of the dead, so he could become his mother. He missed her voice, her presence, her control. Wearing her skin, he said, made him feel close to her again. The detective later wrote, "He said it so calmly, as if describing a hobby. That's when I realized he truly didn't understand what he'd done was wrong." Detectives soon realized Ed Gein wasn't a typical serial killer driven by bloodlust or rage. He had only 2 confirmed murder victims: Mary Hogan, a local tavern owner, and Bernice Worden, the hardware store owner. But what made Gein infamous wasn't the number of lives he took. It was the nightmarish world he built from the dead.
Audio tapes of the mad butcher Ed Gein, his eerie voice for the first time in an MGM Plus docuseries.
Chapter 8. The Trial of a Madman. After his arrest, Ed Gein was declared legally insane and committed to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Doctors diagnosed him with chronic schizophrenia and deep psychosis. In his mind, the dead were never truly gone. He claimed to hear their voices, especially his mother's, guiding his every action. But here's what made psychiatrists question everything. Ed scored normally on intelligence tests. He could hold conversations, follow complex instructions, and function in society. He wasn't a raving lunatic. He was simply a man whose definition of love had become monstrous. Ed insisted he never killed for enjoyment or cruelty. He said he acted out of loneliness, trying to fill the emptiness left by his mother's death. His crimes, he believed, were his way of keeping her spirit alive. For years, psychiatrists studied him, labeling him one of the most bizarre and complex patients they had ever seen. He was quiet, polite, and obedient, a disturbing contrast to his monstrous past. By 1968, Gein was ruled competent to stand trial. The court found him guilty but insane, and he was transferred to the Mendota Mental Health Institute.
They begin just a short drive off the road at Ed Gein's very dark and forbidding home. Many of the local children believe it's haunted by an evil...
Chapter 9. The Influence of Evil. Ed Gein's crimes didn't end in that farmhouse. They echoed through pop culture, redefining horror itself. His twisted life became the blueprint for some of cinema's most terrifying characters. Norman Bates in Psycho, the disturbed son obsessed with his dead mother. Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, wearing the faces of his victims. Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs, creating a woman's suit from human skin. Chapter 10. The Psychology of Ed Gein. What created the monster known as Ed Gein? Psychologists agree. It all began with his mother. Augusta's control over Ed shattered his ability to develop a normal identity. She isolated him from the world, convincing him that women were sinful and only she was pure. When she died, his fragile reality crumbled. Ed was left alone, emotionally stunted, lost, and desperate to fill the emptiness she left behind. Chapter 11. The Monster and the Man. When people think of Ed Gein, they think of a monster. But to those who knew him before the discovery, he was Eddie, the strange but harmless neighbor who fixed things and smiled politely at the grocery store. That contradiction between the man and the monster is what keeps his story alive. He was human, yet capable of inhuman things. He looked ordinary, yet lived among horrors no mind could imagine. And maybe that's what scares us most. Chapter 12. The Final Rest. Ed Gein died in 1984 of lung cancer at age 77. He was buried next to his mother in Plainfield Cemetery, the woman who made him what he was. In his final interview before death, Gein was asked if he had any regrets. His answer? "I wish I'd been a better son." Even in death, people desecrated his grave, stealing his tombstone as a morbid trophy. Remember to subscribe if you want the truth behind the horror, because every monster you see on screen started as someone's neighbor. Stay safe.